today is going to be a breeze. We are doing a very simple landscape painting, and it is going to focus on using watercolor, just kind of going back to basics. And also for those of you that are, you know, well into watercolors, just showing you some techniques to really bring out color. I'm just going to talk in depth because sometimes, you know, we're more focused on the subject, and there's a lot of like little details and tips that I want to share with you today to enhance your painting. So the subject is very simple. It's basically just color fields, and we are going to explore how to bring out each color in a painting. And I am going to talk about how to transform any image that you have into a watercolor painting specifically, okay? Because we're talking about very different approaches. If you're doing an acrylic, an oil painting, a pastel, a drawing, and then when you're doing watercolor. Watercolor is a little bit more specific than most of the others. I would kind of group all the paints, you know, together, the acrylics, oils, even, you know, they say pastel painting or, you know, chalk pastel painting. It's also used in a painting method. So we're going to talk specifically how it changes with watercolor. And I really want to tackle one thing that I notice is very common with everyone, even artists that have been doing it for a very long time, which is overpainting with watercolors. It's very easy to happen. When you're using a canvas, it's very forgiving because all you need to do is you can work over that color and you have a brand new coat, you have a brand new surface to work with. With watercolor, not so much. So there's a few things that you need to keep in mind when you are doing layers in a watercolor, and the things that you need to be mindful of before you put that color onto the paper. So I think somebody's mic is on. Melissa, if you can just make sure that everybody's muted so we can go to our picture. Okay, so
I thought this was our drawing week.
No, it said watercolor because
okay, I guess I didn't read it carefully. Okay,
I'm getting a couple minutes.
I'm getting everything ready.
Okay. Melissa, can we highlight the iPhone? Okay. All right. This has shifted a little bit. Let's go a little bit higher. Sorry, I'm not making everybody dizzy. My device is, oh. Okay, I don't know why I lost connection. Sorry, I'm just having a hard time with getting this straight. Okay, so what I'm going to show you here are two things. So just to go back with the setup of classes, now that we're pretty much a consistent group, we're starting to do each medium like 2 weeks in a row so that we can really get a comprehensive learning experience with each one. So we did watercolor last week, so we're going to do watercolor today. And next week when we do the drawing, or whether it's pencil or ink, and we're going to do it 2 weeks in a row. And that way, you know, if you have any questions, they're still there. You get to experience it for the second time. Sorry if that was confusing to anyone. So what I have here is one that I started, and I started doing some detail to show you a couple things. So what I want you to be looking at here is that even though I went pretty dark over here and over here for watercolor, it's still not extremely dark. I do have my light areas, and what this is creating, it's creating contrast more than it's creating darkening the color. So you can have dark areas in watercolor, and you can have some thicker areas, but they have to be selective, and they have to be for a reason. The reason I have this here dark is this is a very dark area in my picture. It's probably one of the darkest, and the only way to achieve that is to actually go a little bit heavier on the color. When I'm trying to achieve color and I want brightness, adding more color is not going to make it brighter. What is going to make it brighter are the colors that are around it rather than the colors that are on that specific area. So when you are painting with watercolors, what you want to do is you want to think that you are not necessarily painting the color itself. In the image that we have, that's a pastel painting. So it's done with pastels that are heavy. They go on. You can do it with one swoop and get that strong color. With watercolor, you will not be able to get a certain color. It's really hard to get, especially, you know, maybe a very vibrant violet like that, to get it straight out of, you know, your box or by mixing colors. You do it more by giving the illusion of that color. Okay, so your mindset with watercolor has to be a little bit different. Okay, don't think when you put the color down, don't think about how it looks until you put what's around it, because it will brighten or it will dim or it will lighten an area a little bit differently. So I'm going to show you kind of one that, you know, kind of what it's going to look like when you first start. Okay, so what I have here is a very kind of minimal wet on wet, which is a great technique to start almost anything, unless you have to get into very specific detail from the very beginning. And wet on wet painting is really good for people that tend to be a little bit heavy-handed, because you can apply color and it kind of goes and kind of spreads around. It doesn't stay in one area. So most likely, even if you do add more color than you want or you should be using, it's not going to be as thick and opaque. So that is definitely a great thing to always think about when you're starting something. Think, can I do wet on this one to start with, just to get my colors laid out and to see what I'm doing without having too much thickness to it. Okay, so our color palette is pretty limited today. So we have the purples, we have the blues, and we have the greens. So within the greens, we're getting some browns, oranges, and yellows. Within the purples, we're getting a little bit of pinks and blues. And within the blue sky, we are getting a little bit of lavender, purples, and some pink. Okay. The parts that we have are basically going to be 3 parts. So we've got the lavender fields, which I really like the treatment of this painting, because we know that lavender is grown in rows. And to me, I felt a lot of the photographs that I was looking at, they just looked a little bit too kind of structured to do a watercolor. So I like that this has kind of the, you know, just slightly blurring out those lines of the fields. And then you've got the greenery, you've got the hill, and you've got a very simple sky. You have your dark areas anchoring the scene, which is this big tree over here. And then you have the bottom of these bushes, which kind of puts everything kind of together and in place. So what we're going to do is we are going to start creating those 3 fields. And the very first thing you want to think about basically is you want to think about the 3 areas. Okay, so we've got sky, we've got those hills, and we have the lavender fields. So again, what I want you to do when you are using your watercolors is I want you to, okay, push that down a little bit. Okay, what I want you to think about is the consistency of your paint, okay? So before you do anything, I want you to kind of just go into a purple, okay? So if you're having a hard time seeing the paper through the color, it's definitely too thick, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to that color and I'm going to water it down. See, that's the same color. It's still a little bit thick, but some areas in a painting could require that. But when you work with that thickness, you want to make sure that you don't have it in a lot of very large spaces because it's going to be opaque. The key with watercolors for them to work is for them to be opaque. You want them to have layers and layers of color that kind of glistens. That's the magic of watercolor. So again, I'm even going to make it lighter. Okay, with more water, and then more water. So you can see how it's going from dark to light. The only thing that's making it lighter is how much water I'm adding. Okay, so again, using it at full force, barely in little dots, little areas, okay? Having some thickness to it is where you want it to be in areas that you need to have strong color, but also make sure that you're not using it in very big patches. This is kind of where you want to be, middle ground, almost like tea consistency. And then you want this to start with, which is very, very weak tea, like you've used the tea bag, you know, 6 times, okay? So that's where you want to be when you're first starting, okay? So remember, color is always going to be lighter once it dries. So, you know, make sure that you put down a color and then wait a little bit and see what it starts looking like. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to visually divide the page for you so we can see. So we've got, you know, thirds. So we have, I'm just using kind of a grayish brown color. So we've got almost like what would be the equivalent of a pencil. And then we have, so this way we have 3 areas, okay? When you first do this, you want to decide kind of on a line that things are going to go in. You know, you don't have to stick specifically to the lines on each color field that is there. Like for me, I think I raised this line a little bit more in most of my paintings that I've done of this. I just want it to be a little bit higher, okay? Then we do have, again, you can just use like a very kind of neutral color. So we do have that big tree over here. And then we have our, I guess, 5 bushes and then 1 little one in front. So we're just placing them. This doesn't have to be anything that anyone other than you can see.
If I had some snow, I would have it done right. But I didn't know. Where is it under? That's up to the one.
Okay. Melissa, can you make sure all is muted? Just, okay. I think one is not. Okay, so now we have everything that's going to be in our painting. So we're going to start with the color fields. So the purple here, depending on what purple you have, I'm going to show you 2 different purples. So So this one that I have over here is quite a dark purple. I mean, look at that, it's almost black, okay? So this is going to be one that definitely is going to need a lot of water. Look, see? Gonna need a lot of water for it to become kind of like a violet or a lavender. Okay, so that's going to be the basic purple that we're going to use. And I think most sets will have that. In my set, I have this one that I had used earlier that has a little bit of pink of it. If you don't have that, you can use just a little bit of red. I'm just showing you kind of the pinks and how we're, the purples and how we're gonna manipulate them. And then in some areas, we're going to go a little bit more blue, okay? And if you have blue, try to pick the one that looks cooler or like it has less green in it. So I'll show you the difference. Like I have one over here. See, this one just seems to have a little bit of green. So I am going to use the one that actually looks like this. It's just a little bit more muted. Okay, so we are going to just moisten the our paper. Just make it moist. Grab a big brush. I've got my big brush over here. And I'm going to start with the purple. And you know, you can ignore the trees. I don't think you need to leave space for them because, you know, they're a dark area, so they will be fine. So I'm just gonna take enough water to where my painting is damp. If you get puddles, just take a tissue and just pick up some of the water. Okay. And in most cases, your paper is going to curl a little bit when you first use the water. There are pads that are sealed around the corners. They're a little bit more expensive, but they will hold the paper in place until you're done working with it. But this is eventually going to flatten out when you're done. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I am going to take a little bit of purple and I am going to just kind of put it down. Okay, you can see it's really strong, but as I spread it around, so the areas that are getting darker, okay, you can add a little bit more and just let it in there. They're kind of, it's gonna kind of just play around and it's gonna be lighter than it is. Take a little bit of blue. And just put it in there. So again, this is your first layer. So we are going quite light. Okay, there are details of different color, but for now, what I would do is I would add a little bit of blue. The purple is quite a strong pigment in most watercolor paint, so you might need like a little bit more blue than you think if you're trying to turn the color a little bit more bluish. There is kind of a little smidget of red right here. You can just take a drop of red and just let it kind of play around. It's not a very strong red, but it's there. Okay, so we have our purple area. We're going to move into our mountains, which in this pastel painting are kind of like a gray turquoise color. So again, let's kind of look at our colors. So if you have a color that is almost like a turquoise or a teal, like this color that I do have, you can use that. If you do not, you can make your own. You can take some blue, a little bit of green, and you're gonna get that color. See, it's almost identical to it. Okay, so turquoise is basically a blue that has green in with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just dampen that area. And again, you know, you can leave out the trees or you can include them. If you had something that's white, then you probably would want to leave them out. And we're slowly going to start dropping in the color. If you feel that it needs to be a little bit more blue in some areas, just add some blue. And this is, you know, the wet on wet is really fun because, you know, it's not as committal as, you know, painting straight away because the color will move around, you know, a little bit. This is getting a little too green, I think. So I'm just gonna take some blue to it. And up the top, it's becoming a little bit more blue. Oops. That's perfect because now you see how I get to fix a boo-boo. So I put a very strong blue over here. So what I'm going to do, just my brush, I'm gonna just kind of swipe it off, just pull it off. I mean, if it were a color I totally did not want, I would pick it up, but this is a color that I can certainly use. Put just a little bit more green. And there's a little bit more darkness over here. And this is where the trees are going to go, so I don't really need to be pulling in this turquoise color. Okay, so I've got my second color field. Just going to put a clip. Just put a little clip down, so. Okay, and then I'm going to move to the sky. The sky is very sweet and simple. Now, if your water got too purple, just, yeah, I always like to have two. So I'm just going to wet the area. And you know, in some landscapes, the sky is the star. When we did the sunset, it had, you know, a lot of clouds and, you know, the colors when the sky was turning, it was the star. And this one, it really isn't. I would say probably that lavender is the star. So I'm going to take a little bit of a pink or purple and just put it in the middle. A little strong, so I'm going to kind of mop it. See, you just mop the color up, just like you're mopping something. And if it's still too much, just kind of just take it off. And I'm going to add just a touch of blue. And again, for skies, if the blue is too strong, you can just mute it down with a drop of purple. And again, I don't really need to bother with this here because it has the tree. I'm putting a little bit of my blue. And see, like, it's a little too bright, but I think it's not terribly bright. So at this point, and I think doing kind of the turquoise hill was very clever, because if any of your sky and hill mix, they're colors that are related to each other. So we're not getting the problem of the sky turning into a different color. It just looks almost like they belong with each other. Okay, so now we have all our color fields. Now, if the sky feels heavy, or if you want to kind of show off there's a cloud peaking, you can just take a paper towel and you can just, or a tissue, and you can just pull out some of the color and give the illusion of clouds. Okay, so we're still damp over here, but what we're going to do is we're going to put in the trees. I'm going to start with that big one. And that's where I think I am going to use darkest green. If you do have like a really dark green like that, again, look how strong it is. And I'm going to use a little bit of blue. I'm just putting the colors that I'm going to be using on this palette. and I'm going to use some brown to mute it. Okay, so I've got those three colors, and let's see what happens when we add water. Okay, see, I'm getting a dark color, but I can still see the paper. So that's kind of what we want to do. Okay, so I'm going to go in here. And so this area you don't need to re-wet unless it got completely dry, but you can just drop in the color. So I have my blue and my green. I'm gonna put the brown. I'm gonna put a little bit of water on them just so I can kind of pull them around. And the tree starts getting lighter as it goes to the right. It almost looks like it has a little bit of orange in it. Like a brown. Okay, and then here's a pretty dark area, so I'm going to put in my green, put in my little bit of blue, and I'm going to put in my brown. See, what happens if you do this on dry paper, it's going to be very thick, and it's going to be very hard to get rid of. So it's on a damp paper. So I'm just taking water and pulling it around, spreading it. And what I do when I get to the edges is I take a very thin brush, and I take a little bit of water, and I just kind of just kind of feather it out a little bit, you know. It's like we did last time with the kind of just the little flicks. And what that does, especially with, you know, something like trees, it just gives it more of a natural shape. See, I'm not adding color, I'm just pulling out color, and I'm just giving it a little flick out. If anything, add water, but certainly don't add color, because you kind of want it to flare off, because things at the edges, always remember, are not going to be as clear as things that are on the inside. The edges kind of start blurring a little bit. Okay, so I've got my big tree. We can move into the other bushes, which are lighter. They still have the dark coming from the left. It seems, you know, you can see how the sun is hitting them. So I'm going to, we want kind of like a really warm green. So I'm gonna take this lighter green. You see this green over here? It's still kind of thick. And I'm gonna show you what we're gonna do to manipulate this green. So we have this green. If you take, you know, just a little bit of orange, you're gonna get almost like a, you know, a dusty green, like almost like an olive. Okay, and then when you want to brighten it up, here's that green again, and you can add some yellow. You can see how that's going to make it brighter. So we are going to work with these combinations. So again, we're going to a brighter green, and you can go ahead and put it on. Just kind of follow the shape. See how my brush is moving kind of in like a bushy kind of manner. I'm gonna go back to those deeper colors that I had in the big tree. And look how beautifully they're just kind of seeping in. If it's too heavy, just add water and spread it around. And then there is kind of a nice big green strip here. So I'm just gonna pull it and just pull it in and then flick it as you get into the brighter areas. Okay. So in order to keep the connection between the two, I'm going to go ahead and put some of these greens in my tree over here so that they don't look foreign to each other. So I've got that bright green in here. My surface is still damp, so it's taking it. And what you will notice at first is maybe you would be seeing the lines of the color fields that we put in, like you can see a little bit of it in here, but once you start layering a little bit more, you will start seeing less and less of it. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a couple more of those. Again, we're using that brighter green. Notice this one is sitting a little bit higher. You know, they kind of have some fluff to them. So I'm just dealing with my brush kind of, you know, just in an airy kind of feel. I'm gonna take a little bit of orange. And then I'm gonna use some of the darker greens that I already have. Put them on the left side. All my shadows are on the left. You know, that's the great thing about having a reference is you can kind of see where all your shadows are instead of having to guess them. Okay. I think that this bush should have been a little bit closer here, just so that it can meet with that tree. So I'm kind of gonna just construct another one up here. I think I just had too much of a gap between them. Again, I'm working with my brown, green, and blue. You know, again, if it looks too green, add a little bit of brown. If it's too brown, add a little bit of green. Too dark, add a little bit of water. And since I have this dark color, I am going to use it and just put it in that big dark tree. Okay, you can really see how it's starting to have some depth to it. So on your own, you are going to continue working on the shrubs and bushes. So next we're gonna go to the purple and we're gonna see how we're going to bring that out a little bit. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am gonna put in the dark areas. Since I already have a ground, I am going to go in and put kind of those scattered areas that are showing the spaces between the lavender rows, between the individual bushes. They're almost like, kind of like very loosely shaped, you know, rectangles and triangles. So I'm gonna create a dusty, deep purple color. So I'm going to just showing you just got some purple over here. And I'm just gonna take a little bit of brown to it and a little bit of green. Not turn too green. Oops. I'll go with my purple. So I have a very dark color here. It's probably darker than I want it. I'm just going to add a little bit of water. And what I'm going to do is I am just going to let my line, my eye, follow just those little kind of flecks of dark color that you're seeing, okay? Just really let your hand just follow your eye. Don't even look at your paper. You don't need to. And just put in that dark color, which still is going to be purple, except that it's going to be muted. And you mute it by putting a little bit of green, a little bit of brown. You keep adding until it looks right. If it's too thick, you just add some water. So I'm putting in just those little, some of them look like little squares, little triangles, little amoebas. I don't know. They look like, you know, different things. Okay. But you can already see that they're starting to give some shape to the fields. If in some areas it's looking a little brighter, you can add some brightness to that color. In some areas, they're closer together. You don't have to put them all in, but it'll just give you some guidelines to work with. Now, underneath this bush, we are getting some intense purple. So I'm going to put that in. And it's going to mix really nicely with, it's like the bigger brush. It's taking some purple. Again, just caution, that purple is strong, and I think it's going to be strong in most of them. Okay, so I'm just sneaking in that darker purple. Look at how much depth I'm getting. I'm also going to sneak it in here and up here, because I already have the green, so it's not going to turn it purple. But you can see that it's starting to give me, you know, depth and perspective in my painting. There's a little bit of, one, two, a little bit in here. And wherever you're seeing kind of those darker purples. And you know, another thing to keep in mind, if you're painting and then your brush runs out of water, what you can do if you don't have time to mix the color, just take a little bit of water. That way, at least you can continue without having to get a dry brush, which will kind of make your work look a little messy. So one thing you're going to notice now that we've really started to put in a lot of strong color, what's happening is that the areas that we initially put, like this purple, when we first put it on, it looked like, for example, when we have it here, it looks so strong. And then when you're putting the stronger colors, it's starting to fade out. So again, that just kind of shows you that it's all about contrasting and how colors will actually look different without you even touching the color itself, just by what's going to be around it. Okay, so now we want to give that purple a little bit of punch. Okay, again, it's going to be selective. We're going to go back to our super incredibly strong purple color that we have. And try different colors that you have. I have this almost like magenta color. Which I think can give a lot of brightness. And also by adding blue, the blue is going to give it a lot of brightness. So that's kind of the area that we're, you know, the trio we're going to be playing with purple, blue, and magenta if you have it, or a drop of red, or a pink if it's in your palette. We're all using different ones. So it's hard for me to tell you specifically which one you're going to use. So let's start putting some of what we already have in. Okay. And you want to have, you want to vary. Now remember, you already have color underneath that, so you don't have to go, you know, really that dark, because every time you layer, you are going to get more intensity. And just let your eye kind of see where it's turning more blue. Just add a little bit more blue. Where it's turning a little bit more pink, you can add a little bit of that pink. See how pretty that color is turning out? So I'll let you work on that a little bit. Again, just alternate between the blues that you have, and it's probably best to stay away from the blue that might have, you know, any green in it, because we're really trying to get that brightness. The blue is going to be what's going to add the brightness to that purple. But also, even though we, you know, can't immediately match that strong, like that really violet color that's in there, you know, against the green, it's honestly, it's looking a lot more purple than I thought, you know, the watercolors could achieve. So you might have a nice surprise there. And in some areas, you know, just try you know, just blue. You know, and just let your eye kind of make the decision. It looks too purple, add some blue. Too blue, add some purple. Too heavy, add some water. And the one thing, if you don't have any white, you want to make sure that you seal off your white areas, because in the wrong place, they can be very distracting to the eye. So, you know, if you had water or something, they could possibly work in context, but with this, and then here, there's kind of almost like a strong blue. Okay. So we are going to do a little bit of work on the hills, and just, you know, the sky is really not going to need a whole lot more. And we're going to work a little bit on this key tree, and maybe just some of the shadows. Okay. So you can see on the right side, there's a lot of blue. The right side of that mountain. So I'm just going to take the blue and just kind of, so my surface is starting to dry. I'm not having a very moist area. So, you know, you just want to be mindful of that, is that the colors are not going to be, you know, as light as when you put them in. So I'm going to play around between blues and some soft greens and turquoises in the hills. And in some areas, you're getting a very light, almost lavender wash. Barely there. You can see it kind of over here. And what it does, it's actually connecting the colors nicely together. It seems that it's getting more blue as you go higher up the top of the hill. And, you know, by all means, exaggerate the colors a little bit, you know, amp them up. But make sure that you are not thickening the color too much. There's nothing wrong with, you know, going brighter, but you want to make sure that you're still transparent. Okay, gonna just put a few more details in the tree. And again, even though we did not paint the rest of the bushes, we can still include those dark areas. So again, I'm gonna go to my trio of, you know, purple, green, a little bit of brown. Okay, if somebody's unmuted, can everybody make sure that they're mute? It distracts others, I think. Melissa, if you can just check the mics.
What did you say?
Somebody's unmuted.
Okay.
I think it's always the same mic. Okay, and again, when you get to the edges, just flick it a little bit, little brush. And again, I'm using the dark to just anchor some of the areas. And I hope everybody finishes this one, because I don't think you will have, you know, that much to do after we're done. So what I'm doing is I'm just, you know, kind of enforcing those shadows that are in the bushes. Still is damp, which is kind of working nicely. And again, I'm just going to take some water. You know, and wherever the color doesn't feel like it's blending in or flowing, you know, just take a little bit of water and move it around and see if that looks any better. And also we're going to take some of that dark and we are just going to water it down a little bit and just kind of put in some of the little nooks that we are seeing, little gaps. It'll give that tree, those bushes, a nice texture. You can see just this little, you know, texturing these little kind of gappy areas, they will give a lot of depth to it. Okay. All right, so the sky, like I said, I think needs very little. You know, I mean, of course you could make it a little bit stronger if you want, but I don't see, maybe the only thing I would do is I would try to bring out that cloud a little bit. And again, you know, the sky, depending on the color of blue that you choose, can really change the atmosphere, you know? So, you know, let's say you're doing, you know, kind of like a London type sky. You don't want it to be this bright. I would take, you know, just a drop of orange, see, and just mute it a little bit. It's still blue. If you're doing, you know, Hawaii, you probably want, you know, this nice brightness. So remember that there's no wrong color to use for the sky. It just depends on the kind of sky that you're trying to do. And I think this one, you know, almost has like a periwinkle to it. Oops, sorry, I'm off the, okay. So I'm just adding just a little bit of color just to bring out those clouds. So I'm using one that doesn't have green in it. And if it's too heavy, you can just add a little bit of water. Okay, and there we have it. Let's bring it up a little bit closer. You can kind of see. So you can see even in the darkest areas, you can still see my paper. And when you look up close, it kind of looks like a tangled mess. And then when you look at it from a distance, you're going to get some really nice depth and dimensions. So let's see what questions you might have. So do you feel that this was helpful, kind of going back to a little bit of, you know, just some technical things? Because, you know, talent and, you know, a good eye are very important, but most materials do have a technical side to them that needs to be, you know, conquered. So it's important to know how to use the materials and understand what they can do. So if you can unmute yourself, or I don't know, Melissa, do you need to unmute them? They're still muted. Do they need to unmute themselves, or are you gonna?
I'm trying to unmute them, but it's not letting them themselves.
Okay. Can you unmute yourself if possible?
Yeah, I'm muted.
Okay.
Noel, can you hear me?
I can. I
I
can always
was
hear
trying
you,
to get.
Andre.
Excuse me?
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, I want to know I wanted like a turquoise blue for the background. How would I get that? I've tried and I can't get it.
Blue and green and lots of water.
Yeah, I tried that, but I guess it got green and blue. Okay, I'll try again. Thank
So
you.
why don't you send me a picture later so I can see what needs to be tweaked. So do you think that this was helpful? Just kind of really breaking it down into simple color planes? Has it been useful?
Yes.
Okay, good. I feel even, you know, even for me, when I started it, it just made me a little more aware of, you know, the fact that probably each area in a painting does have an overall color. I mean, they're great reminders, no matter, you know, how advanced you are. If you're a beginner, there's always something you can get out of going back to classic work and basics, and just really, you know, revisiting what paints can do. Does anyone have any questions? No? Does can you kind of show me real quick, Nuera and Kina, you want to share what you've done? Really good, yes, beautiful. Okay, Edith, can you show me?
Very pretty.
Okay.
Oh wow, look at that.
Let me see, I can't see it. Okay, Susanna, can I see yours? Beautiful. Wow, very nice. Can't wait to see it. Lucia?
Yeah, I'm afraid I messed up, but I can't watch you and paint at the same time, so I've given up.
I'm gonna take that as a compliment.
I'm mesmerized by what you're doing, and just like
I know.
You know.
Yeah, I know, and you know, again, that's why we have the class recorded. So, you know, I'm totally fine if you actually just watch. You know, when I'm learning something, or if I look up a video on YouTube, I watch it the first time just without anything, and I do that a lot with sewing because I'm still learning. And the next time I will bring, you know, the project and pause and do that. So really going back to the videos, I think, you know, even if you go back to something specific, maybe you don't want to watch the whole thing. You can just go to where we did the purple, or where we did something in particular.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Carol, how did you do? Let me see. I'll be the judge. No, that looks great. The turquoise is really good in it. Very nice. Marlene, how did you do? No? Okay, you're muted, Marlene. Can you unmute yourself? Let's see. Pam? Gorgeous. Wow, beautiful. Looks like you're almost done. Sharon, how did you do?
Well, I'm nowhere near done.
That's okay.
You know me.
Pam is an established artist. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
Not that it's not a challenge every time, but you know, oh, that's beautiful, Sharon.
Yeah, I just need to go in and,
That
you know.
I am amazed. Every week you are just blowing my mind. I am not just saying that. I am just,
Thank you.
I hope you're as proud of yourself as I am of you, because honestly, it's like I don't know who found who. You found the art, or the art found you. It's wonderful. It makes me so happy. I mean, you know, there's so many things that we have no idea that we love and that we're good at, you know, and then all of a sudden, you know, you become a master gardener, or you become a painter. I mean, it's great. All those things, you know, life just takes away so much of that, you know.
When I was showing people my conch shell, they kept thinking that was the image that I had to draw. I said, no, this is mine. This is what I did.
Oh my God.
And they were like, so yeah, it's an excellent feeling. It really is.
That is so cool. Phyllis, how did you do? No. Beautiful. And I'm sure you would do a gorgeous pastel with this one. I have a feeling you're going to. Okay. So if we don't, does anyone have any questions for me or any? Okay. So next week we're going to do pencil drawing. So you can get ready for that. It can be a colored pencil if you want. But we're doing like a one tone. It's not a full set of color. You know, colored pencils are very time consuming. So that's kind of why I'm avoiding doing them on the Zoom classes, because we would have to work on like little postcards, because it really does take a long time to achieve that build up. So that's why we do the you know, like one color and maybe adding some accents to it. So I will see you next week. Please email me, call me if you have any questions or need my opinion on something. I would be happy to. Stay safe. I miss you, and have a great rest of the week.